Having won the Battle of Qadisiyah and captured the city of Babylon after a short siege, the Arab Caliphate began preparations for an attack on the capital of the Sassanid Empire, the city of Ctesiphon. The Arabs were well aware that while the Persians were in possession of Ctesiphon, they could at any moment try to counterattack to regain control of Mesopotamia. Despite a series of defeats, a huge empire remained under the control of the Sassanids, thanks to which they had the opportunity to gather forces and return all the territories occupied by the Arabs. The righteous caliph understood this very well as the fact that, due to the huge size of the empire, it would take a long time to gather additional forces in the vicinity of Ctesiphon. That is why the caliph ordered to attack the capital of the Sasanian Empire immediately, while its defense is provided only by those Persian units that did not have time to fully recover after the defeat in the Battle of Qadisiyah. The Persian capital actually consisted of two cities. Directly Ctesiphon, which was located on the eastern bank of the Tigris River, and the city of Ardashir, which was located on the western bank and provided protection for the bridge over the river. Since the movement of the advancing Arab army was able to slow down the detachments that the Persians placed along the road to the capital, Yazdijerd III received the necessary time to organize the defense of Ctesiphon. Yazdijerd was well aware that the enemy would certainly attack the capital from the direction of Ardashir. It was there that the main forces were concentrated. When the Arab detachments began to approach the city walls, the garrison of Ardashir began to fire at them with stones from catapults. This attack was effective, and the Arabs, having suffered serious losses, were forced to move away from the city walls. To minimize losses, the Arab command temporarily abandoned the frontal assault on the city fortifications and focused on conducting siege work. The siege of the city began in January 637, but at first the Arabs practically did not attempt to storm it. They took advantage of the help of Persian engineers who converted to Islam and focused on building siege engines. In March, the Persians decided to try to break the siege. The garrison of Ardashir went beyond the city walls and attacked the Arab army besieging the city. The attack of the Persians came as a complete surprise to the enemy, thanks to which they managed to break through the siege ring, pushing back the Arab troops. The situation was saved by the timely approach of reinforcements, thanks to which the Arabs managed to stop the enemy's breakthrough. A bloody hand-to-hand fight ensued, during which the commander of the Persian garrison of Ardashir was killed. Having lost their commander, the Persian detachments, which suffered serious losses during the battle, hastily retreated under the protection of the city walls. Realizing that the enemy had concentrated large forces in the vicinity of the city and it would not be possible to break the siege, the Persians sent an emissary to the enemy camp with a message from Yazdijerd III. Shahinshah called for peace and proposed to establish a border between the two states along the Tigris River. In turn, Sa'd Abu Waqqas rejected the offer of peace, suggesting that the enemy either surrender by paying jizya, or fight to the death. Since the Sassanids did not plan to surrender, they continued to fight. After the peace negotiations failed, the Persians decided to withdraw the garrison and the inhabitants of Ardashir to Ctesiphon, and then destroy the bridge over the Tigris River. According to the plans of the Persian command, a barrier in the form of a river was supposed to prevent the enemy from continuing the attack. Thus, while the Arabs will think about how to ensure the crossing of their army across the river, additional forces will arrive in Ctesiphon, which will not only protect the capital, but also defeat the enemy army. Very soon, the Arabs were able to occupy Ardashir, abandoned by the enemy, but because of the destroyed bridge, they did not have the opportunity to cross to the other side of the river and continue the attack. The opponents were separated by a full, flowing river about 750 meters wide, which, according to the plans of the Persians, was supposed to stop the Arabs for a long time, but it turned out differently. The fact is that some Persians who lived in Mesopotamia had already managed to convert to Islam and join the army of the Arab Caliphate. It was they who showed the commander of the army of the Arab Caliphate a place where it was possible to ford the river. Having received valuable information, the Arab army, wasting no time in vain, began crossing the river. In turn, the Persians, who managed to organize an effective defense of their capital, did not take care of protecting the fort, because they did not think that the enemy would know about its existence. The Arab army began crossing the river in small detachments. As soon as the first detachments of the Arab Caliphate were on the eastern bank of the Tigris River, they were immediately attacked by the Persian cavalry. The situation was difficult, but not critical, since the Arabs did not have time to transport a large number of forces. The Persians had the opportunity to throw them into the water, but it turned out differently. The news that the Arab army was on the east bank of the Tigris caused panic in Ctesiphon. To avoid captivity, Yazdijerd III, together with his close associates, left the city, leaving behind all the treasures that his predecessors had been accumulating for centuries. Meanwhile, a bloody battle continued on the banks of the river. The Persians pressed the enemy, intending to throw him into the river, depriving him of the opportunity to use the ford for crossing. It was at this time that news reached the fighting Persians that Yazdijerd III had fled. In this situation, the Persian horsemen decided that they did not want to die in vain and fled from the battlefield. The Arabs continued to cross the river. Meanwhile, not only the garrison fled from the Persian capital, but also most of the local residents. There is information that only the guards of the palace of Shahinshah did not leave their post and continued to guard the treasures of the Sasanian Empire. When the army of the Arab Caliphate completely crossed to the eastern shore, it began to move towards the capital. After some time, the Arabs, without meeting any resistance, entered the city, which turned out to be completely empty since the garrison and the inhabitants left it. Only in the vicinity of the palace did the Arabs encounter his guards, who intended to keep the defense to the last drop of blood. According to the Arab chronicles, a noble Persian warrior, who had previously converted to Islam and joined the army of the Arab Caliphate, was able to persuade the guards of the palace to surrender. It is difficult to say how reliable this information is, but Ctesiphon really fell into the hands of the Arab Caliphate without a fight. After the Arab Caliphate established control over the capital of the Sassanid Empire, huge wealth fell into its hands, which the rulers of Persia had been accumulating for centuries. Despite this, the Sassanid Empire was not defeated, as it had the strength not only to resist, but also to return the lost territories. At the same time, the Persians did not have the time necessary to concentrate their forces. The Arabs acted swiftly so that the Persians did not have time to gather strength and go on the counterattack. In turn, the Sassanids also did not waste time in vain. They hastily gathered all the forces available in the region near the village of Jalula in order to try to stop the advance of the enemy and, if possible, counterattack in order to return the lost capital. Unfortunately for the Persians, the Arabs, thanks to their scouts, learned that they were gathering an army near Jalula and began to act immediately. It should be mentioned that the city of Jalula itself was of great strategic importance, as it controlled the road leading from Mesopotamia and other regions of Persia. Sa'd Abu Waqqas was well aware that the Persians did not have time to concentrate a large army in the vicinity of Jalula, so he immediately sent part of the army under the command of his nephew Hashamatba to the enemy camp. Before the arrival of the Arab army, the Persians managed to build a fortified camp, protected by a rampart and a moat. Since none of the parties had an impressive numerical advantage, the confrontation between the Arabs and the Persians continued for quite a long time. The Arabs could not storm the Persian camp, but the Persians could not leave it either. In November 637, the Persians left the camp and attacked the Arab army. A bloody battle ensued, during which the Arabs still managed to win a decisive victory. Having defeated the enemy near Jalula, the Arabs laid siege to the city itself. Since the city was perfectly fortified, the siege was quite long, but in the end the army of the Arab Caliphate still managed to capture it. After establishing control over Jalula, the army of the Arab Caliphate advanced towards the cities of Mosul and Tikrit in order to establish control over them. Having reached the outskirts of Tikrit, the Arab army laid siege to it. The garrison of the city put up fierce resistance. Since the city was perfectly fortified, the Arabs, despite numerous assault attempts, could not capture it. Fortunately for the Arabs, the Christians living in Tikrit helped them get into the city, after which the resistance of the garrison was quickly crushed. After the occupation of Tikrit, the army of the Arab Caliphate advanced towards the city of Mosul. Having reached the outskirts of the city, the Arabs laid siege to it. The garrison of the city was well aware that he could not expect help from anywhere, so he decided to capitulate, pledging to pay jizya in exchange for saving his lives. After the cities of Jalula, Tikrit and Mosul fell under the control of the Arabs, all of Mesopotamia was in the hands of the Arab Caliphate. It should be mentioned that, inspired by their successes, the Arab army wanted to start pursuing the enemy retreating deep into the territory of Persia, but the righteous caliph ordered them to stop, stating that he would like a wall of fire between the Rashidun Caliphate and Persia, as he prefers safety to war their subjects. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new videos.